Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Renaissance Room podcast. And I have not read the book by Sabrina Strings, right? The End of Romance or The Death of Romance. I may look at that today, and I wish I could have referenced it for context in reading and coming on here to talk to you guys. But I wanted to come on today, and first let me start this podcast episode off by saying, I think what's really unfortunate about being a Black woman is the ways in which you have to overcompensate, like always, right? And don't get me wrong, right? As women, any woman who is on the outskirts of society, right? And that's any woman, right? Of any race, who is not living within the confines of patriarchy, right? She's not partnered with a man. She's not married. She's going to have to answer to that, right? She's going to have to answer to man about why she is not partnered, why she is not living within the confines of patriarchy, and why she may or may not be miserable. Like, she's going to have to explain how she got to this place, right? How did she get to be this outlier, right? That we cast stones on. Right? How is she living in the forest as the ogre? Like, she's going to have to answer to that. Right. But I think particularly for Black women, it's another layer of exhaustion, right? Not because of everything that we go through just in life, but because you're Black, right? And so, like, when you're a Black woman, white women get the ease, or the pass rather, of at least being desired, at least being feminine, at least being worthy of protection and being seen as women, right? But for Black women, you already are at a deficit, right? Your femininity is invalidated, who you are as a woman, desirability, like all these things are just like dings, right? Like, you don't get any points or protection in that, right? You're automatically seen as problematic, argumentative, right? Unworthy, undeserving. You're not considered desirable, right? Unless you undergo some type of, I would actually say like some type of extremity. Like, this is why we are seeing a lot of Black women getting access to plastic surgery. And I said this in a previous episode. I know it was a bit of a touchy thing. But I'm gonna stand by this, right? And it is truly, I do believe that for many Black women, I think a lot of Black women are absolutely finding some satisfaction, right, in terms of being desirable, right? I think for many people, and not just Black women, but people in general today, right, we pretty much associate likes and things like that with validation. And I think that is a healthy sense to an extent, right? Obviously, if people are liking things, maybe, it's something that is, favorable by many, right? Or at least that's how our brains work when it comes to social media. And obviously that is not a burden for Black women to carry specifically, but that is something that shows up, right? And so at first it was the BBL, right? And that was sort of like the Black hallmarker, or at least a status symbol rather, akin that to the white woman's Birkin, right? Having a BBL was a huge status symbol, right? It was an indicator of, I'm getting money, right? I'm getting money. In a lot of ways, these women were getting money, right? They were entrepreneurs. They were dating very wealthy guys, right? Like, so it really was a huge status marker at the time in which women were undergoing these surgeries, right? We've seen Kylie Jenner and all these other white women start to partake in this same surgery, which was to really plump their derrieres, which obviously we know the history of the derriere, right? Obviously there was fat phobia, there was Sarah Barman, all these different things. But overall, there was always sort of like this hypersexuality, this overt, desirability. And for many people, right, that for many guys, right, that was pretty much like, if she's got a fat butt, then you know what I mean? That's what it is. And I think for white women, obviously, they were able to sort of like partake in that because they had always really followed after Black women, right, in terms of desirability. And so that's when white women started, and even to this day, like, white women want big butts, right? And that was never a thing. Back in the day, it was like they would literally, jump on each other for having a salad, you know what I mean, with ranch dressing, right? Like, it was such a different thing. And so for a long time, white women really coveted the desirability of Black women, even if that desirability was rooted in just overt sexuality, right? And obviously we know there's historical context, right? For Black women who used to work as maids and nannies and things like that, or enslaved women, right? Who would work, in the homes of white women. There was always sort of like this competition because white men found them desirable, right? I don't think it was about the nurturing aspects. Obviously, we know that it was just merely about sexuality. It was about sexual exploitation. And so there's context there, right? And so white women have always kind of had this gripe with Black women for that a reason. And so white women said, you know what? We can't beat them, join them, right? Let's kind of partake in Black culture. And I think we're seeing this more and more today, right? It's becoming ever so prevalent, right? And culturally acceptable, really, for white women to appropriate our culture in such a way, right? We're seeing all these Black kids pop up, right? From these white women, right? All of these interracial babies with no desire to honor their culture, no desire to really have not even desire rather, but no awareness in regards to cultural context, right? Cultural consequence, right? All the things that really go into being Black girls, right? But rather, just merely a desire to be partnered with a Black man and have a Black baby and essentially flaunt this, or rather emulate for some of these women, right? If you grow up and you listen to a lot of mixed kids, or you even really see mixed kids in your community, many of them are abandoned, right? Many of them are in foster care. Many of them are, and I don't want to speak so matter of factly, but I will say from my own personal observations, right? I have seen quite a few mixed kids, even in my own life, right? Relatives who partner with white women. These kids oftentimes are abandoned by their mothers. Now, again, I can't speak matter of factly, right? I don't know the whole world. I'm only referencing maybe like 5 or 6 people that I've seen, which to me, that's quite a bit. You know what I mean? It's just my small little world and my little reality. And I think just from what I've seen, you know what I mean? I would say that that's pretty alarming. And I think that that's something we should certainly take a look at, right? Why do I think this happens? Well, because I think that there's always sort of like that fork in the road, right? Blackness, right? Racism, jealousy, envy, right? Covetousness of Black women that is going to certainly show up, right? If you're raising Black girls. Now, obviously, we know there are just some people in life in general, when you talk about celebrity culture, influencer culture, who feel as though, they model a certain type of value system to where, not even just celebrities, but some people, right? Model a certain value system to where they believe that if you just throw money at a thing, then it's not going to be a problem, right? If you just throw money at it, it's not going to be a problem. Money's going to pretty much take away all of the stuff, right? And then there are just some people who obviously just make mistakes and maybe aren't smart and maybe are superficial, whatever the case may be. But overall, what I've seen is that there does seem to be sort of like this pattern of negligence and this sense of like rejection that I think a lot of mixed kids grow up with experiencing. And obviously, I don't know if that's universal, but from what I've seen and, maybe a couple TikToks I've seen as well, I'm kind of putting the pieces together here, right? And so what's really unfortunate today is I think when you start having conversations about single mothers, right? And as someone who found myself in that space, right? Being divorced and everything like that, I want to say that, do I think it's preventable? Right? And first, let me say this. I think there was a part of me that felt like I wasn't smart enough, right? I'm like, oh my God, right? Like I'm getting a divorce. I'm not smart enough. I think there was a part of me that felt like if I had gone straight to Harvard or had this type of career or something, I would have had like a better picking, right? But then it's like I meet women who are highly educated, who are much older than me, right? I'm not saying much or like significantly older than me, but who are older than me, right? And they have the degrees, they have the careers, and they still find themselves being single mothers, right? There are women that I meet who let me just say that, right? Have saw, and not maybe in real life, but maybe some people who are online sharing their stories, right? Who spoke about how they waited, all these years to have kids in their later years, right? We know single mothers and all of the discourse around that typically centers on younger women, like women in their early 20s and teens and so forth like that, like teen pregnancy and everything. But I've seen women who are in their later 30s, right? And who have the career, who have the businesses, and they don't quote unquote choose better, right? They find themselves in the same exact situation. And so it's like you have this very interesting thing where women are encouraged, Black women or women in general, are encouraged to wait, right, till outside of the quote unquote, well, I don't want to say quote unquote, right, it's biology, and to have children and to find partners, and they still find themselves in a situation. So do I think it's something that you can avoid? I think you can obviously, take a look at yourself and say, okay, hey, here are some choices that I've made. Here's how I contributed to this. But I referenced Sabrina String's work, and it took me a while to even want to open this book. One, I heard that it was depressing. Two, I don't really want to hear about the death of romance in the dating dynamics and how Black women are just not desirable, right? Statistically, because obviously she's a sociologist. I think she's a sociologist, right? But I don't want to hear about that because that is depressing, right? That is depressing, especially when you start talking about the world and all the different things that are constantly changing and shifting and moving. So I didn't want to hear about that, right? So I purchased the book, but I haven't read it, right? But I think now I'm curious, right? And so, do I think personal choices? Yes, I do think personal choices. But I would say from my experience, right, and what I experienced is a little different, right? Do I think there is a role that we all play? Absolutely. But I believe that my experience and what I've experienced is a little different, right? Not different in the sense that it's unique, but different in the sense that it taught me what was out of my control and how much of the dating dynamics and Black women ending up as single mothers is really out of our control, right? Within this game, I'm just going to be honest with you, right? Like patriarchy, men who are even remotely desirable. I'm talking about like maybe they have good conversational skills. He might be missing some teeth. He may not even be 6 feet square. Like he may not be any of the things, but if he is maybe sociable, if he, like any type of little thing, you know what I mean? Whether it's a job, whether it's a car, whether it's a hobby, like if he's a poet, if he's a writer, like any little thing, because Black men are so highly desired, right? Any little extra thing that they do is like, it's like a positive rating. Like it just adds on top of the positivity, right? So like if Black women are starting at this deficit because you're not seen as feminine, you're not, seen as worthy of protection, you're not seen as woman, you're not seen as desirable, but Black men are all these things, right? You're just quite naturally, by default, right? You're at an advantage as a man. So if you add good job, if you add cute apartment, if you add, he has a dog, like any little thing that they do is going to be like a bonus, right? In terms of their social status, their presentation, and their market desirability. So we're starting at a disadvantage already. But again, when I said Black men, it's different. And so with that being said, okay, and I know you're going to be like, I'm trying to be mindful of this because as I'm saying all this, I still have confidence in myself. You know what I mean? Like it's not giving I've got to this point where I'm just like, oh my God, life is, that's not really where I am. But I wanted to talk about this because I was listening to a podcast and I actually think they did a terrible job talking about this. And it was very cringe how they focused on the relationship. And I think that's another thing. And let me stay focused, but I'm just going to say, I think that's another grievance for a lot of Black women is that when you do break up with someone, right, when you do find yourself in a situation as a single mother, depending on how you got there, right, it's always on you to overcompensate. Not only do you have to overcompensate for this person's choices, right, and they're choosing to leave the marriage, they're choosing to abandon you, they're choosing to walk out on their family and not make things work merely because they met someone else, right? We're going to get to that. But like, now you have to overcompensate once you're single, and you have to overcompensate by being so incredibly nice, and you have to overcompensate by holding back any anger from injustice. And you have to overcompensate by proving that you can do this and that you're so happy and that your life is so much more prosperous and that everything, like it's just always this overcompensation, right? You have to overcompensate for being so incredibly happy that he's married now and, they're doing their thing. You have to you just have to over freaking compensate. And I think for a lot of single mothers, Black single mothers specifically, they find themselves in dating dynamics where they feel like they have to overcompensate. And it's crazy to me. That burden, that onus is put on Black women. Anyway, Do I think it's by choice? I think that yes, we can honor our choices. Absolutely. And again, I'm not speaking for everybody's particular situation. I am more so speaking for women who have found themselves divorced and then single mothers, right? And I say that because that's my experience, right? I'm not saying that to, talk about superiority and morale. It doesn't matter. We're all here in the same room. Okay. But I can only speak from that perspective, right? What was I going to say? Okay, let's back to the podcast. Back to the podcast, right? I think that I just genuinely think that men have the pick of the litter. You know what I mean? And I want to kind of sit in this place of like this kind of like softness with you guys, because I do think we have to have these conversations, And I don't know, maybe we don't need to have these conversations, but maybe this is something I just feel like women should know, because I just think that Black women carry so much competition, so much anger, so much frustration with other women, so much frustration and self-hatred within themselves, right? I think it's incredibly heartbreaking to be a woman who's fully competent, who's fully loving, who's imperfect, yes, but none of us are perfect, right? Except for Jesus Christ. And to find yourself in a space where you aren't desired, right? To find yourself in a space where you've given so much to relationships and people still don't want to be with you, right? And in all the encouragement of like, you can find better, you're going to meet someone else, that's all great and all, but I think that walk of shame that society places on Black women, and more specifically Black mothers, is such a heavy burden that we carry every day. It's almost like the criminality, right? You can link it to the criminality. I don't even think Black men even carry, are they still carrying criminality, right? Maybe if you are, if you talk about colorism, right? But you can kind of act into that, right? And so I think society demands that we sort of like perform and explain and all these different things. And it's really unfortunate, because the reality is that Black men on average, right, they really do have the pick of the litter, right? If they're with you and things are getting rocky and, or maybe you have the baby and things change or whatever the case may be, you could be the sweetest girl, but like, they can find someone else. You know what I mean? Like it's very easy for men to date and to meet women. You know what I mean? Like, I think it has to be a personal values type of thing, but I think because men don't carry the shame of, leaving relationships, right? And they don't really care, right? They don't carry the shame. They don't carry the responsibility of like, separating from their children and choosing to start another family, right? There's no shame for that. There's no heaviness of like, wow, my child is wondering why I'm not with their mother, right? My child is growing up and I'm missing milestones. There's not that level of responsibility. And I do just think that's just how they're socialized, right? I was watching Baby Boy last night, honestly cringing at the commonality of the film and its depictions of Black men, right? And this really like perpetual state of adolescence, right? And you don't want to compare to white men or anyone else, but you could definitely say, right, and in comparison to other men and other cultures of men who do have this responsibility, who do have to be more intellectually equipped, right, to have a family, and obviously, there's crime, there's single fathers, there's men who are abusive everywhere across all races, right? But on average, I do believe that for the most upstanding persons, right? And obviously, yeah, you could say like upper class Black men and, upper class, middle class Black men and women do have that level of standard, but I would have to disagree. I just don't think that there's really any like collective or cultural, right, responsibility or shame projected at men who do just choose to walk in and out of women's lives and start families all over the world, right? We've seen this even at a larger scale with Nick Cannon. On average, that was comedy, right? Maybe it was relatable for some men, but it wasn't anything that that wasn't anything that induced shame, right? And so, because of that, right, because there really is no level of critical thinking in regards to reproduction, which I think goes back to sort of like this bull and this sort of like, enslaved mentality that I think a lot of African-American people have, right? And this is why it's important for you to read the Willie Lynch letter, okay? Read that book. It's very short. It's about 90 pages, if that, maybe 60 pages. Go ahead and check that out. I'm gonna go ahead and drop that in here real sly. Go ahead and read the Willie Lynch letter. Go ahead and read that. It's a great book, very quick, right? But anyway, I think you can be the most amazing person and, they just want something else. Things get rocky and, you've got old girl over here. She's waiting. She's, not been married, right? She's not had any successful relationships. I think so many Black women, because of our lack of desirability within the marketplace, right? I think that is a little bit shifting, but I think it's shifting towards a little bit more like, I don't want to say narcissism, but I'll say arrogance, right? Women are having access to cosmetic enhancements, right? All these different type of beauty routines and things like that. So I think that's absolutely inflating some people's confidence, right? And I'm saying inflating because I think confidence should be something that's internal, right? You should feel that way either or, but many of us don't feel that way, right? And so I think it's shifting in terms of like the competition and how we feel about ourselves. Maybe, I don't know, maybe we're getting better at masking it because we do have the armor of beauty, right? Which has been made accessible to many of us, right? I've seen many African women, beauty content creators start bleaching their skin. And, when she first started, she was this beautiful, rich complexion. And now she's like, a cinnamon bun, you know what I mean? And so it's like, it's crazy out here. Right. But yeah. And so I think that when you have that type of like when it's always someone waiting in the whims, not because she's bad, right? I think that's one of the most things that's really unfortunate about a lot of Black women. It's like, there is this, ratio. And I'm not trying to be like scarcity minded. Like I'm not scarcity minded, right? I'm just more so saying like, there are a lot of single women and there are a lot of women who've never been partnered. There's a lot of women who've never been married. There's a lot of women who, maybe have a little bit more than this one in terms of resources and all these different things. And so if you're a man, right, you're swimming in this sea of very beautiful fish, very beautiful women, right? It's going to take the Holy Spirit, right? I don't know. It's going to take some type of very powerful being, some type of personal conviction to really get you to, be in alignment with like commitment and monogamy and all these different things, right? And I think for many men, it's like, what's the point, right? I don't think that infidelity is their reason for choosing not to partner and to build families. I actually don't think that's the reason. I think there's just cultural acceptance, right? It's just cultural acceptance, right? I'm not saying that other men don't cheat on their wives, that's not what I'm saying, but I do believe that other cultures absolutely have a foundation of family, right? This prioritization of family, this understanding that like, okay, if nothing else, I got to be here for my kids. You know what I mean? And so, and obviously within American society, we all get swept up in America's values, right? Of autonomy, right? Of this never ending freedom. And now, right, these projections of independence and self-help and, self-growth and personal development, right? We all feel like we have to leave our spouse to go off and pursue the next best thing, right? But culturally, yes. And obviously we know that for Black people, from the Moynihan report, right? Just from the government, like there has been so many things, and these things were happening in 1967, right? Like, so it's been a lot of work, a lot of narratives that have been crafted, a lot of things that have been projected onto us. And if you're not a scholar, if you're not someone who, honestly, if you're not a scholar, you're not going to know these things. So you're just going to be existing within this system, within this society, within this culture that says, hey, it's absolutely okay to, leave your wife, leave your kids, go off and start another family and so forth, right? You don't really have to better yourself. Just find another woman with more resources, right? Find another woman with, more money, or who is kinder, or who is nicer, or who may allow you to get away with some things, right? Versus really having to be someone who's responsible and who does take care of your family and who does, provide for your family. Because if you operate in that space, right, then you're going to be a lot less likely to up and depart, right? But when you keep all your money to yourself, right, when you use it for showering women and for flaunting your I don't know, clothes or shoes or whatever, right, then you don't really have that responsibility of your resources going to a household, right? You're not really providing for your family. So it's probably going to be easier to walk away because you're not really making that investment. But I don't want to continue to talk to men because I definitely think it does fall on deaf ears. I think, we've been doing this work for far too long now, and we don't really get anywhere in terms of educating men, right? And this is why I've always kind of had a little apprehension sometimes. And I don't want to go in a deep end because there are men who follow my channel and listen to my work and support what I do. But I think on average, when you hear conversations like, well, why don't we talk to Black men, and why, these boys need role models? I think when Black women stepped out of the classroom, right, we actually kind of started to see an outward spiral of, degeneracy. right? In all of our beating down of Black women, it's done nothing but beat down our communities, right? It's done nothing but put us in the back of the line, right? It was a Black woman who encouraged you and who told you that you could read, right? Who encouraged literacy and who encouraged your education, right? It was your mother who took you to all your football games and helped you get to the league to become this NFL player. And in the absence of the father, there's never any conversations about it, right? There's never really any talk about it, from the rappers to the athletes to the academics, right? Like, there's no real, again, responsibility, shame, or anything put on these men. It's just like, it is what it is. Here's mama. Mama did a good job, and that's it. And it's never, look at what mama's carrying, right? As I was watching Baby Boy, I just thought about, just seeing how, Yvette has to go and get these abortions, right? And you see her and she's grieving, obviously, literally taking a life, okay, of her unborn child. And there's no real compassion. There's no real support, all in the name of trying to keep her baby daddy, right, with her and their family, all these different things. And so I know it's a film. I know in this sense, it does obviously relate to a more extreme case. And I would say extreme case, it's not extreme, right? It's actually really common. But again, I'm kind of speaking from my experience, so to speak, but that's a commonality, right? And, in that, right, you can really see sort of like what Black women have to go through, right? What Black women are dealing with on the back end. And again, these are conversations that are just never really had, or, our emotional states are never really tended to. Why? Well, this is the piece that I listen. I believe that Black women are seen as like conduits to meet, I don't want to say a means of no end, but I just want to say like to meet ends meet. That's a bad way to say that. I think that Black women are seen as mules. I know that was kind of bold to say, and I do apologize. Again, I don't see myself that way, but I think in terms of socialization, I think in terms of relational dynamics, I absolutely think that Black women are seen as mules. I don't think that Black women are seen as women to really love and pour into and nurture. And that's why when you start talking about the upper Black man or Black man of middle class, they do go and partner with white women, right? In their minds, it's not, okay, I'm going to partner with a Black woman and I'm going to settle down and have a family. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of men who have, right? Again, that's true. But I just think on average, because of the social conditioning, because of femininity and its standards and womanhood and its standards, right? I just don't think Black women are seen in that way. And that's why you can have men who are communal leaders, right? Podcasters doing these really big things, supposedly in the Black community, but they're not married. They're not married to a Black woman, right? They've got no plans, no intentions on marrying a Black woman. And don't get me wrong, it's not to say that maybe she doesn't want to get married, or maybe she may not be, certain, maybe she may not have character or whatever. I don't know. But like, I think that's always the very unfair onus that we put on Black women. We have to say, well, there must be something that you're doing. Right? There might be something that you're doing, because if that's why no. And obviously it can be trauma. It could be trauma. It could be all these things. But I say that to say, I just always think that's very interesting. You have these communal leaders that we elect and they're never married, or they speak about women in a very degrading way, and it'd be women that be supporting them, So I don't know. I think just all in all, do I think it's avoidable? I don't know, honey. One thing I can say is I think you take a chance. I think, if I'm being honest, I think you're better off marrying incredibly young. I think even that is going to be troubling, right? Because I think if you marry young, you don't really know who you are. It's a very big responsibility to take on, but you're likely, wanting a relationship, you're wanting to partner. I do think you are going to carry this burden of always wondering what if. I think you're going to carry this burden of, just being unhappy. And I say that because I think when you do something before you're ready, or you marry young, you can't really appreciate it, right? Because your mind is not fully developed. You haven't had enough adverse experiences to really appreciate partnership. And I think that's why we see, certain content creators, I don't want to give any names, but, who've been together since high school and they've amassed the fame, they've amassed all the success and everything, and them choosing to divorce, right? Them choosing to go their separate ways in the name of self-discovery, right? That's why we hear, for example, right, like Savannah James, she comes on her podcast. She often talks, her and Aisha Curry, right, talking about dating and all the things they didn't get to do and whoop-de-whoop. Same thing with Michelle Obama, right? Like, when you've not been on the opposite end of, being mistreated, being degraded, right? And we don't know what goes on in these people's relationship, but I don't know. I'm going to be honest with you. I actually think that there are some good men out there. And I think that women who do have good men, I'm just going to be honest, I don't think they've been through the mud enough. I don't. And you know why I think that's also why I think they do get the good men, right? Because they haven't been through the mud. They haven't been through the gutter. They haven't been drugged through and used as a mule, right? I think these are women who have obviously had really, really high standards, and I think that definitely comes, obviously they all partner very early, right? And that's the thing, right? So like, that's kind of like the trade-off I would say is like, if you do partner early, you get married early, I think you have a healthier chance at having a relationship, because I think the more adverse experiences you have, I think it's unfortunate, but I think even being in this world, right, being socialized within our society, within our culture, it's going to play on your self-esteem. And so that's going to have a direct correlation about who you choose to partner with, what you feel you're worthy of, right? Cultural trends and all these things, they shift, right? Our standards, they shift our way of relating to one another. And so I think that's why you do have the Michelle Obamas, the Aisha Currys, the, Savannah James. And again, I'm not going to sit here and say these women are perfect. I'm not putting their relationship on a pedestal. I'm just talking about what we see. All right. In terms of representation. Okay. Unfortunately, I know we had to put the celebrities up there, but Michelle Obama is not a celebrity, although she's really trying to mingle among the girls. And I don't understand it. I don't understand it, Michelle, but okay. And honestly, I'm actually going to give Michelle some grace, because I think being a Black woman, I can only imagine the rejection that in a Black woman presenting as such as Michelle, right? I can only imagine the backlash that she gets. Like, if we're already talking about Black women not being worthy, Black women not being desired, Black women being degraded, Black women being seen as, I say unworthy, that's the same thing. Then I can only imagine what she may be feeling. And we don't know if her and Barack are getting a divorce. We don't know. Like, we don't know. Right. So like, let me just chill. But I'm saying all this to say, because I do think we need to believe that there are healthy alternatives. I think when we don't, we do stay in a cycle that's incredibly cynical, right? And I don't think that's helpful or healthy either, just with us being women. So we're going to just erase everything I said, and we're going to go back to the part where I said women who get good men often can appreciate it. Yes. So that's a trade-off, right? Like, when you do get married early on, right, you don't really have the wisdom, and you haven't had enough adverse experiences to really appreciate something good, right? So when you do get a good man, you don't want to stand behind him. You find yourself swept into cultural narratives. And I don't want to say stand behind him, because I know, y'all, I'm sorry. My Coretta Scott, my 1950 views just came out, and I do apologize. Forgive me. But I do think ultimately you can't appreciate it because you just haven't had enough experiences. So it's not to take away from anybody's reality, but it is to say that, you just don't know what you don't know, and so you can't really like appreciate it because you don't know anything else. You know what I mean? And you're curious about other things, right? Like Savannah talks about that, like, I'm so young, and, and all those things, like, that's great, but it's like simultaneously her and Aisha Curry are like living the life, right? Like Savannah, maybe she just wants to be a mom. We don't know. But Aisha Curry has this amazing, cookware brand. She's got like a coffee shop, like all these really, really dope things, like 4 beautiful children, a husband who we ain't heard no spectacles about Stephen Curry. Like, we ain't heard he had a baby back in the day. He got somebody on. Like, we have not heard anything. About that man. Like, he seems to really love his wife. You know what I mean? Like, they're super cute, like beautiful kids. Girl, I'm sure nannies, chauffeurs, chefs, all the things, beautiful home, all the things. And Aisha Curry still be getting up here like, and I'm not judging her. Like, I'm just saying, like, this is what it is. This is the point that I'm making, right? It's like, well, I just wish that I was desired in the thing. And I just wish, and it's like, girl, what? Girl, excuse me? Okay, girl, I will come and trade. We could trade places right now, but it's like, you can't appreciate it because it's like, this is all you know. And the mind and maybe immaturity, maybe just the drawbacks of getting with somebody young and staying together, whatever, your mind goes like, okay, I want something else. I want to experience something else. Even despite having all the things, right? Like, it's not like these women seem oppressed in their relationships, right? They're very much doing their thing. I think even with Michelle Obama, I don't feel like Michelle stood behind Barack. I feel like she absolutely stood beside Barack. Like, I don't understand why, you know what I mean? Like, I don't get the drawback on that anyway, because it was like, it never gave that. It never gave oppressed. You know who looks oppressed? Melania Trump. You know what I mean? She looks oppressed, right? But like, Michelle has fully been standing beside Barack this whole time. Like, it's giving neck and neck. It's giving, I have something to say. Here's my wife. My wife has something to say. My wife is giving speeches. Like, first lady, fully. You know what I mean? I put you first. You know what I mean? But Michelle, and again, that's what I'm saying. I just think women who marry early on and who do get these really, really great guys, right? And I think again, self-esteem plays a huge role, right? You haven't had these really, really terrible dating experiences. You haven't had these experiences. So you just had your partner who's been stable and sturdy, and you just don't appreciate it. You feel the need to rebel against that, right? And maybe it's human nature. I don't know. Maybe these women do feel confined. Maybe they have their own struggles, right? And I'm not here to put anybody's life on a pedestal, but what I am going to say, I think the girlies who do get these really, really amazing guys, like I said, I think it's a lack of experience. I think that's why their confidence and things like that are very high, right? They've not been, unfortunately, maybe they haven't had that many dating experiences where they've been disrespected or mistreated or whatever, or manipulated or gaslit, right? All of those things fall into the lines of abuse, even if it's not physical, okay, or verbal, right? And so, yeah, you can get these great guys, but I just think that they don't really. Yeah. So anyway, I think I'm done. I think that's the podcast. I don't think there's any, let me say this. I think as you get older, right, touching on the single mother piece, I just think as you get older, you understand life and life's complexities, right? I don't think that it's worth explaining that to every single person, right? I think you need to, and I'm not going to say you need to, because let me slow it down, right? I just think that persons who have experienced some sort of like adversity in their lives, right, which should be people who are older, but we know that people are avoidant and people are immature and people just don't have that ability to self-reflect. I think everybody should relate to life not working out, right? As you get older and you become an adult, you should have at some point, right, been dealing with life and its complexities and the disappointments of life and some of its inevitabilities, right? Nothing is a guarantee. And so I don't think that there should be shame around single mothers or people who got divorced or whatever, to an extent, right? And I say to an extent because I don't know, y'all. I just kind of feel like people be doing that divorce thing like it's cake, like, oh, not happy, on to the next. And that's men and women. And I don't, like, regardless if it's a man or a woman, I don't stand by that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't stand by it. I don't know, y'all. Like, I just think it's like, what are we doing? Like, you know what I mean? I just think that's like crazy. But anyway, life doesn't always work out, right? You can work hard at something, but it doesn't mean that it's going to pay off, right? That's why we have faith for some of us, right? That's why we stay humble, right? That's why we do what we can. We find joy in the day. Like, whatever little positive Pinterest quote you want to insert here, go ahead and insert now, right? But like, that's why we do what we do in terms of building support systems, building a positive narrative. Some people call it affirmations, right? Faith, whatever, to buffer us from life's disappointments. Because when you become an adult, you realize that nothing is a guarantee, right? Nothing is a guarantee. You can absolutely work incredibly hard for something. You can go to school, you can do whatever. And it's like, that doesn't mean it's going to pay off. You can quit your job, take a leap of faith, start a business, and the business fail. Like, nothing is guaranteed. And I think in that, right, it's the same thing with relationships. Right? For some people, no, not everybody is immature in marriage. Some people are mature and it just doesn't work out. Some of us, some people, it's like your spouse just wants out. They don't want to be with you. You know what I mean? Some people, your spouse is leaving you for someone else. Some people, your spouse is, whatever. Right. But like, at the end of the day, you can't force somebody to be with you. You can't force somebody to appreciate you. You can't force somebody to be mature. You can't force somebody to grow up. You can't force somebody to be a parent, or you force somebody to be a spouse. You just can't force responsibility on people. You know what I mean? So it's like, anytime you're dealing with humans, you're always going to be coming in some sort of like nuance and complexity where they can let you down. You know what I mean? And that's why I don't think we should have shame for single mothers, because that's just life. And I think at the end of the day, for many Black people and Black boys in general, it's like, just think if single women, right? Just think if it was some type of law in place, some type of legislation to where it's like, if you bore a Black boy and his father does not want to be in the house, right, he has to go into the orphanage. How much you want to bet right now? Them numbers are skyrocket, bro. The numbers would be like 500,000. 175,368 this month. Black boys admitted into the foster care system. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think when we talk, like, we gotta, and I ain't gonna say we, because I understand mainstream media is to be consumptive, right? It's to be digestible for many people. And, you know, if you're not someone who can kind of think with left and right side of your brain, if you're not someone who can really hold complexity, right, and the totality of ideas and hold history, hold the present, like if you can't really cross-reference like that, this type of stuff is going to go over your head. So we have to, so the media and everybody who's on the forefront, popular podcasters and all these different things, they have to take one segment, one topic, one moment in context, right? And that has to be the message, because if they were to toggle between the screens, like they do them controllers, right? They be playing them games going left, right, you know, on them controllers, right? On them game controllers. If they could do that, then we could sit with the complexity in the totality, right? And we can have more compassion. We can have more understanding. And most importantly, we can rid Black women of some of this cultural shame that we project onto them, right? And so, yeah, that's the reality. And I hope that you guys got something from this. Matter of fact, I know you got something from this, because this was a very insightful podcast. I had so much fun recording this. Mind you, oh, you know what? I was about to say I ain't had no coffee, girl. I definitely had an energy drink, even though it was only a little smidge. It was only a little smidge. But yeah, so I just think that that's the reality. If we were to say, hey, you know, boop-de-whoop, all these kids born of single mothers, or, you know, father walks out, he don't want to be here, right? You got to sign on the dotted line, sir. Do you want this child? Do you want to stay in this household and raise this child? If the answer is no, boom, foster care. Them numbers are skyrocket like crazy. So I think we got to be a little bit more appreciative about the people who don't give up on us, right? I think we got to be a little bit more appreciative about the Black women who are in community centers, who are doing this very tedious, laborious work of being, right, the village, right, grandmothers, all right, regardless if, you know, society wants to call her the matriarch, the one who broke the Black man. No. Right. We got to be more appreciative of the teachers, the educators, right, the communal leaders who stay in these communities and who speak life, right, who use their resources to feed our children, right, teachers buying snacks and all these different things, books and all these different things, right, using their time to come and speak to our kids, right, to pour into our kids, like single mothers who are raising sons, who are showing up every single day, like even when fathers are not, who are taking these kids to practice, who are trying to get these boys around some positive influence, despite the fact that on average, a vast majority of African-American men, grown, musty, all of it, right, are not good role models and do not have a desire to be good role models, and who are very, very self-focused, who are very, very selfish, who are very, very focused on what it is that they want, right? They don't care about the representation. Like, you know, you see some of these men, they in positions, they got these nonprofits and they're pocketing all the money, like just grimy, right? Despite all of that, right? Like despite all of that, like you still have these Black women showing up, like, so I just think at the end of the day, you can't turn your back on the people who got you. You can't turn your back on the people who've been a rock. You know, you can't turn your back on the Black women who show up day in and day out, right? Whether it's your mother taking you to school, taking you to practice, whatever, like you don't forget about those people. Don't forget about the teacher who spoke life into you. Because guess what? Mr. Charles wasn't in the classroom. Mr. Charles was down probably in PE. Who knows? We ain't gonna project no stereotypes. I'ma chill, but I'm just being real with you. If Mr. Charles was even in the school. You know what I mean? It's Black women who are showing up, desiring to be teachers for these low salaries because they care about the kids. They care about the Black kids in the school, who are teaching these young boys, no, you can read, you can write. You don't have to just dribble a ball. You know what I mean? Let me show you what you can do. Guidance counselors pulling these kids aside, talking to these kids, bringing these kids hot plates, buying them Chipotle when they get A's and B's. Like, what are we really talking about? You know what I mean? What are we really talking about? Do we want to, we're destroying our community with our own hands. And it gets to a point where it's like, you have to be wiser than that. You know what I mean? You have to be wiser than that. And you get grown and you realize you don't know the people's situation. You might be somebody right now on the other end of this high and mighty. Turn around, find out you're going to be a single father to a crazy baby mama. You know what I mean? Because life just be happening like that sometimes. You know what I mean? You got to do it for the plot. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. Okay, back to me being serious. I'm joking. But seriously, though, Seriously. So I just think at the end of the day, you guys, don't turn your back on the people that raised you. You know what I mean? Start looking at the people who wasn't there. Start looking at the people who didn't show up, period. You got to know that it's not your mom's fault. You got to know it's not your auntie's fault. It wasn't your grandma's fault. Not on average. Not on average. The benefit, the social status, the social validation that women get from being partnered with a man and being married is so high, right? That social currency is so high, and its sense of safety and protection and all these different things, right? Validation, that not too many women are actually willing to give that up easily, right? And it's unfortunate because, like I said, in Baby Boy, we endure so much to try to keep the relationship. And that's just not Jodie in a depiction of in a film. I mean, not Jodie, Yvette in a film. Right? That's the reality for many of us. And you can call it low self-esteem. You can call it what you want. That's fine. But I do think at the end of the day, the film is called Baby Boy, not Yvette's bad choices. You heard? So I think it gets to a point. Okay. It gets to a point where we just have to, either look at the full picture, toggle between the screens, toggle between the information, cross-reference like y'all do on them game controllers, or just shut up. You know what I mean? Because the conversations aren't productive, right? They're not productive. And tearing down the only pillar of the community is not wise. It's not wise, right? Black women step out, step back. Guess what? We're not going to have any educators. We ain't going to have no village. We ain't going to have no babysitters. We ain't going to have no wisdom. We ain't going to have no love. We ain't going to have no nurturing. Like, we got to do better. We got to do better. Right. And I've addressed other things as well. But this is the point of the conversation. I don't want to veer. I don't want to be on here too much longer. So I'm going to go ahead and go. Again, I know you got something from this. Thank you so much for coming to the Renaissance Room. Peace.